Welcome to Starport Omega Podcast. I'm glad you're here, so stay tuned.
Now
Yes, but we are starting
we had a
episodes
we
1
had
and
a
2, Season 3.
yeah
Okay.
we had a reboot halfway through season 1. We had a reboot in season 2 when Captain Pike came aboard. This is yet another reboot. And as we all know, the Discovery went 930 something years into the future. So just to set the timeline clear, that puts Discovery. Let's see. Discovery was 8 years before the original series, which puts and as we talked about last week, Star Trek: The Next Generation, Star Trek: Deep Space Nine, and Star Trek: Voyager all took place approximately 100 years after the original series. So that puts Discovery 930 or 960, whatever it is, 930 years ahead of their own timeline, and it also puts it 830 years ahead of the timeline for The Next Generation, which means that it's also more than 800 years after the Romulan explosion.
Sure.
And the reason I bring that up is because, Judd, what were you saying about dilithium?
Everybody in so far within the first 2 episodes here, they're not even talking about antimatter or anything like that. Dilithium is the power source that runs everything. It's not.
No,
Well, and I got into a conversation with someone on Facebook about this too. Somebody said something about why is it the Romulans aren't the Romulans don't need antimatter. They use the singularity drives. So they use a singularity core to run their power their systems. So why aren't the Romulans now kings of the galaxy? And it's exactly what you said. Dilithium is not the power source. Dilithium is the catalyst. Think of it in a modern car. Dilithium is the carburetor to the engine. Dilithium converts all that incoming energy from the antimatter explosion into something that the starship's power systems can actually use. Unfortunately, dilithium is also consumable, so it actually wears out as it goes. That's the only thing I could think of. But yet, all the dilithium in the galaxy exploded, which means we're gonna have to assume it's only the refined dilithium because there's still some dilithium out there. By definition, not all of it exploded, right? But it's now super rare instead of being something that everybody just can dig up out of the ground wherever.
well, it wasn't ever anything you could dig out of the ground or wherever. That's why they had that lithium mines in the active.
Right. Yeah, there were it was always a somewhat
I,
rare resource.
if I remember correctly, in the it was a Star Trek novel back in the '90s by Diane Duane called Enterprise that really went into an in-depth discussion of how the impulse and warp drives worked, all the way down to explaining the insignia on people's shirts in the original series were actually showing the power curve of the warp drive engine.
Oh wow.
But that's what that arch at the bottom meant. That was what gave them the ability to explore was the additional power they got by using a dilithium antimatter mix. And they also went big into the impulse drive.
Another one of the books, since you mention it, one of the post TNG books has Riker serving aboard a freighter. And the freighter actually has a fusion reactor instead of an antimatter reactor. And just as an aside, all of the Enterprise also has several fusion reactors, including all the impulse drives. The impulse engines are actually fusion reactors. What I thought was interesting is they were actually able to get to warp 2 using this fusion drive. Obviously, it made the ship really slow, but somehow, they were still able to pull off enough power to do it.
There is it's where I get my name from. Actually, no, that's not where I get my name from. There is one book. Sorry, there's enough old Star Trek novels that's it's kind of hard to remember plot lines until I start thinking about them.
That is for sure.
And Final knows about this. Brad knows really well about this particular episode because it's this particular book. It's really funny. How much for just the planet?
Which was just the planet.
That was like a musical Star Trek book. It was really good.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
It's like if a Star Trek episode or even movie was written by Mel Brooks. It's just.
But they do go into mining and development and use of dilithium and what it's used for. I mean, granted, it's all taken tongue in cheek, but one of my favorite lines is a good dilithium engineer knows that to cut dilithium, you don't just straight up cut it. You make a slice here, and then you wait 2 weeks. You make another slice over here. You make another, wait a couple more weeks, make a slice here, and hey, it's done because it's a fourth dimensional thing. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think they said it's like you cut it today, you cut it in 4 hours, you cut it on Tuesday, and you cut it 3 days after the day you started cutting. It was just like this weird, like, wait, what? Kind of
And
moment. It's like it's hilarious.
there was a scene where they were using big sheets of dilithium as cooking ware. They're bringing out the main entree, the main course, on a sheet of dilithium. Like, how would you do that? It's overabundant on this planet, so that's why they were using it as, because nothing hurts it in the oven.
I was
Well,
gonna
I
say,
mean,
it can handle
hey.
it can handle an antimatter reaction. It can handle a cooking oven. Good lord, that
True.
camera's terrible compared to that one. It's a 4K camera, but yet look how fuzzy it looks. I mean, good lord.
Fuzzy,
And
fuzzy.
that's still a good webcam. At the end of season 2, the evil AI known as Control did what every AI ever will do, and realized that the universe is better off without these pesky humans making things complicated. So it was going to do what they all do and wipe out all organic life in the galaxy, which strangely is also the plot for Star Trek Picard. But setting that aside, yeah, and talk about recycling plots. I mean,
I
so
think it might have been the same writers.
Discovery gets out of the jam by taking the starship and all of the AI software that was loaded on board its computer 1,000 years into the future, and because apparently Control doesn't have the patience to wait around 1,000 years and pick up its campaign where it was before. So the very first thing we see after the recap from last season is we see this ship right here. Now, Jim nailed my thinking the first 2 seconds after I asked him what he thought this looked like. Does anybody else remember this scene? And what did you guys think of? What was the first thing you guys thought of when you saw this ship flying around, being chased by the other ship through the wreckage of those starships?
I kind of thought of this guy here.
Oh, that's a good one. I hadn't thought about that guy.
This is the mothership from the game Homeworld.
Yeah.
To me, looking at that, it kind of screams, the pivotal scene at the end of episode 4. They're all running from the Death Star, and boom.
Right. And the thing is I'm watching the ship flying, and so Book is the guy in charge of is flying this thing. He's actually over here on the right side of the ship. This whole area here is cargo. There's several cargo pods. So I'm sitting here going, you got a guy who stole someone else's cargo, flying through a field of wreckage, being shot at by another guy in this vessel that's like this asymmetrical thing, and just the whole thing just made me feel like Han Solo being chased by one of the bounty hunters, through the asteroid field outside of Hoth. I mean, that was the first thing I thought when I saw it. And then that wormhole comes, he's getting away, and then the wormhole comes along and screws everything up.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that scene. I really enjoyed between that scene and was it right before it when we saw the communications guy, which we'll get to later. I really enjoyed seeing the difference in technology between Discovery's era and this future era, especially
That
the
she landed
programmable
in, yeah.
matter. Yeah. Does anybody else have any thoughts about the starship escape and the wormhole entry? And
I love how
didn't get a
she
slide of Burnham
basically
coming
hit
in.
the ship.
Yeah, she hits the ship.
It's like, oh man, the inertia behind that had to be unreal.
Yeah, so that spacesuit she built is a lot more powerful than any of us gave her credit for.
No
To
joke.
be able to bounce off that thing, slam into the surface of a planet, and still be able to get up and fly away. Also, what do you all think about her solution to her problem? I mean, literally, hello, IT, have you tried turning it off and back on again?
Yeah. When she was falling towards the planet, she was like rebooting everything and screaming at it and all that. I was waiting for her to make the swooshing dive off the top of the planet and do the yeehaw like Iron Man in the first. That's what I was thinking about.
Well, dang it, now I lost my train of thought.
It was a very short train to begin with.
Yeah, very short.
It's a crazy thing.
Ouch.
Sorry.
Just an engine and a caboose.
You sure it wasn't just the caboose? It was like nothing else left.
That
Just meat,
explains
meat.
why it's not going anywhere.
Oh, now I remember. A quote from somewhere, I forget what, and it can be reused however you want. As far as her suit being as strong as it is, it's as strong as the plot needs it to be.
Oh, plot
Ah.
armor? Ouch.
Plot armor, yeah.
So you know how the Ferengi have the rules of acquisition?
Yeah.
Yes.
Something
Yeah.
like 204 rules. I have worked up the rules of drama, and so far there is only one rule. Actually, there's like two rules, but the first rule is logic, reason, science, and your own established canon and mythology don't matter as long as you can make something interesting happen in the story. With the second rule being that most stories only work if the people in the story are stupider than the audience.
Well, let's see what the current people think of Star Trek fans. Well, let's see. How many people currently involved in production of Star Trek shows actually give a rat's ass about Star Trek?
More than you would imagine.
Well,
Yes.
you know, and here's an interesting thing. Aside from Star Trek 6, what is regarded as the best of the Star Trek movies?
Wrath of
Two.
Khan.
Yeah. Bunny,
Cricket.
you don't
Cricket.
have an opinion? Star Trek The Wrath of Khan is widely regarded as the best of the Star Trek movies, and there are those who will tell you that Star Trek 6 is better, but Star Trek 2 was actually produced by a guy who had never seen an episode of Star Trek. He came in wanting to make a great movie that happened to be about Kirk and Spock and all these guys.
And this movie was written by somebody who'd only seen one episode of Star Trek. The same guy that wrote Star Trek 2.
Yeah.
It was Nicholas Meyer. But he wrote some really good Sherlock Holmes books.
So, I think that we got really down on J.J. Abrams, for example, for basically wrecking Star Trek with the Kelvin universe, but I don't think knowing Star Trek is really a prerequisite for writing good drama and good space opera with the Star Trek name on it. I think that you have to simply be good. I mean,
the only requirement I would think for a good Star Trek whatever is try to keep a little bit in line with canon. That's all. With
and that really helps,
canon.
doesn't it? Speaking of canon, have you found any canon mistakes in the first episode, Judd? There was at least one that I know of.
There's one, and I see that we have a slide for it as well. So when that slide comes up, I'll talk about it.
Okay, so I don't actually know what our next slide is because I don't have my little window up with the
previews.
Cricket. Where is it? Notes, slide 6.
It's the one after this one.
Speaker notes. That's what I was looking for. There, I can see what the next slide is. Okay, so what happens? Michael lands on the planet. This planet, forgot what it was called. It doesn't have a name apparently. And what's the first thing that happens when she gets there? She gets into a fight. Neither one of them wants to hurt the other one, but at the same time, they both feel threatened by the other one. So, I gotta say,
start punching the crap out of each other.
I gotta say, I really like these two characters together. They seem to play well together. And their initial tension, I think, is fairly well done. I mean, obviously in this fight, they're pretty much equal. He couldn't overpower her, but she wasn't able to take him down either.
Yeah, but she's also injured.
Yeah, and she's injured on top of all that. So one of the things that I realized as I was rewatching the episode to tear it down, to break it down to 4 or 5 salient points. A lot happened in this episode. At first,
Oh yeah.
I thought these 2 episodes were kind of small and like didn't really go very far, but so much was packed into them that we just like, and they did it so effortlessly that we didn't realize that all this stuff happened.
They're
And
both nearly an hour long.
yeah. So I mean, obviously, Michael meets Book. They go over to the exchange, the Andorian exchange. You know, he betrays her. She tries to get him, tries to get even with him. And the next thing you know, she steals a bunch of dilithium, and they run off, being chased by. And now we can address the Morn in the room.
My only problem with that is, unless they're trying to use the original Morn costume, that's not what his species is supposed to look like. Because
Really?
it was established in DS9 that the reason why Morn had no hair, or had hardly any hair, is because he kept latinum in one of his mini stomachs. Liquid latinum, which was causing poisoning throughout his body. That's why he looked kind of the way he did.
That's interesting. I have to go back and find that episode. Um,
And then
So-
at the end of that episode, Morn actually upchucks a little bit of latinum and gives it to, I think, somebody. I forget who.
Gross.
Yeah.
Okay, with that gross detail, I'm gonna go ahead and take my first shot of the night, because good grief, that's just a no.
And I have to say, I loved how
Oh,
Michael's affect changed when she got hit by that space dust. When that guy dusted her to the space truth serum.
oh
Suddenly
yeah.
she went from being almost Vulcan-like to like being really emotional and like really just over the top. I loved it. I loved seeing her laugh and enjoy herself instead of being all like, I am a Vulcan
She's
and I am not really a
nervous.
Vulcan and I'm trying to be Vulcan. And she actually acted like a human being finally.
Yeah, but the
And
thing
that-
is, you have to
and that-
remember, like, a lot of times laughter can be a mask for nervousness, for fear, for self-doubt. And she shows just how much of that is hidden inside her, really. It lets us connect with, the very humanity that is the character. And even though she is trying not to divulge information, she's going to the other truths within her own truth herself.
Yeah. That scene right here, I loved it. She pops out, she gets spewed back out by this giant space worm, and she's like, I didn't know how this day was going to turn out. Just the looks. She gave like 4 or 5 distinct looks, as he was picking her up, and I loved every single one, and I just couldn't get them on the camera. I mean, I was trying, but CBS, and this is one thing that really annoys me. CBS is locked down the stream so that you can't capture frames. The only way to get pictures,
pirate it.
the only way to legally get pictures of this is to take a camera and point it at your TV set, and that's really frustrating. They minimize the image every time you pause it. They minimize it down to the corner of the screen, so you got to back up and you got to pull out your phone and you try to take a picture while it's going. OBS doesn't work. Snip Tool doesn't work. None of the usual screen capture things work because it's all the trusted computing. So
Stuff.
so as the third pilot to Discovery, and I'm going to say that we have 3 distinct series in Discovery, not just 3 seasons, but they're going to be 3 series with 3 very different takes on Star Trek, and 3 very different, well, in this case, 2 different eras. What do you think? What do you guys think of this episode as a new pilot to this new series of Discovery?
So,
Well, my thoughts on it.
well, share them with everyone, because not everyone knows your thoughts on it.
It's Star Trek Andromeda.
Star Trek Andromeda. That's right.
Hey, you're not wrong.
I think it speaks to the times we're in, and a lot of it is like they're looking for a new hope. And that's exactly what the season's going into, is they're looking for something tangible. They're looking to keep believers alive, that there is still good in the world, especially with all the chaos and turmoil that is this year. So I think a lot of this season and the way it's starting, she's losing everything. But she still has hope. She still has determination. I'm going to get attacked by a cat. Sorry. I'm not sure if anyone saw the paws behind me, but...
Well, and that's one thing that Burnham and Saru have in common. Saru gave up his entire world in order to join Starfleet. And eventually, of course, he managed to reconcile with his people and even bring his people out of their slavery and oppression. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my favorite character in Star Trek Discovery, Saru and Tilly. Tilly,
Tilly.
I heart Tilly. She's so great. She's really the audience perspective character of the show. She's us as we, the eyes that we see everything through. And I thought she really brung it to this. Even though she was nervous as crap, I thought she really brung it for this episode.
I talk when I'm afraid, then keep talking.
Been
Been there, done that. I talk when I'm nervous. I talk when no one responds. Well, then keep talking. That's fine. I love that.
So whose inner Star Trek junkie was screaming bloody murder at the fact that ship landed on a planet in one piece?
Right. I was looking at the nacelles going, seriously?
There's not enough
Yeah.
death and dismay on that ship for it to, like, even if they, dampen the landing with, reversing tractor beams and everything else, the shields being at the weakened capacity they were at, they shouldn't have had, they should be missing shit.
Yeah. I would much rather have had that. I mean, as dramatic as the descent into planetary space was, I didn't get the picture of the ship coming down. I should have put it in there. As dramatic as that was, I would much rather have seen the ship get trapped in orbit with no power and, "Oh, Captain, we're losing altitude, Captain. If we don't start the reactor soon, we're going to burn up in the atmosphere." And that would have been, to me, a much more reasonable plot
Yeah,
device
but they've
than
got to still
parasitic
go
ice that's going to eat
forward.
your ship.
They still have to go forward with the difference in technology, even though we're not as advanced now from in real time from when Star Trek first started.
Mm-hmm.
They're still trying to show a time lapse between that first series and this one. So they're still trying to make it advanced. They're trying to bring in the new viewers, the younger, the new age followers, the new age believers, if you will.
Yeah, but my point here being that the ship should not have been able to land on a planet intact. Voyager was unique. The Intrepid class was unique as the very first starship that could actually land on a planetary surface.
Yeah, and it was designed with that from the beginning.
Yeah.
Up until then, this ship should have broken into a million pieces on its way down through the atmosphere.
Yep, but then the show would be over. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
Even in Star Trek: The Next Generation, the Enterprise D was capable of a planetary controlled crash, but only the saucer section. Part of the reason the saucer section can separate
escape pod
is it would turn into basically a giant aerodynamic escape pod. Yeah, and it could actually glide down through the atmosphere and land using its impulse drive. But again, even the Constitution class, the Enterprise, original Enterprise, was capable of that. But in that case, once they separated the saucer, it could not be reattached. If you notice on the original series, the impulse drive is actually on the back of the saucer section. I'll be right back.
So while Tom grabs his saucer, and that is not an euphemism. Shit, can't talk.
No, that is not a euphemism.
Yes.
And I'm
Thank
sorry
you.
that all I have is the J.J. Abrams verse hot rod version of the Enterprise. But this is the impulse drive right here. This is what actually acts as a rocket when it's flying at sublight speeds.
Yeah.
These are not rockets. These generate a field around the ship that actually they're like giant magnets, and they generate a field around the ship that allows it to actually break Einstein's break
It
the laws
generates
of
the warp
relativity.
bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, if this, imagine if this thing were to land on a planet. I mean, the whole secondary hull here would just be crushed, and the nacelles would fall down because these warp pylons aren't really capable of holding up the weight of the nacelles, not in
They're
atmosphere.
meant to resist the stresses that would be put in against
Yeah.
them without gravity as a factor.
And this model always drives me crazy because look how tilted up the warp nacelles are. Just wrong. And the model is not like that in the movie.
Yeah.
This toy has always just been really terribly made.
The
So
other
whatever
issue
company
that-
made this thing, you guys did a crap job.
the other issue I had with the J.J. Abrams universe is they actually had the ship built on the ground.
Yeah,
Why?
yeah, that was.
Because it was dramatic.
They wanted that scene with Kirk driving by on his little motorbike and looking at the ship.
Yeah, that makes
There
no
was a
damn
book
sense.
though.
It's cheaper.
There was.
If you are a post-gravity civilization, in other words, you can get out of your gravity well, it's no longer an issue. You don't necessarily control gravity, but you have the ability to basically walk around it, where it's no longer an issue. You would not build things on the ground where things would be where weight becomes an issue, where you have to worry about all these extra factors of problems. You would build in space where the only thing you got to worry about is inertia.
What's interesting is actually a couple of the books talked about building the Enterprise, and what they actually did is they built the saucer section in one giant component on the ground, and then they flew it up on impulse drive into orbit, and then they attached it in dry dock. They attached it to the neck that held on to the rest of the ship. I thought that was an interesting idea. I tend to agree with you though, Brad. I don't think that you would build a ship like this. I don't think you'd build one of these on the ground ever. The
Just
whole
think-
idea of doing that is ludicrous.
Just think about the amount of cost, the infrastructure you would need to build just to build part of that ship. It's like 3D printing. The amount of support you'd have to put up would be costing almost as much as the actual item you're building. It's not worth it.
Well, yeah, and of course, keep in mind the whole visual design of the Enterprise was entirely because of somebody thought it looked cool back in 1966. I mean, if you were to build, if you started on a clean slate, you wouldn't have a ship that looks like that. If you started on a clean slate today, and Star Trek had never existed, and you were building one for the first time, but still using the ideas of how warp drive and everything else works, I think you definitely would have a different ship. You'd have something that's got a lot more symmetry, bidirectional symmetry, both vertically and horizontally, and you'd have
Honestly,
you'd have something where the nacelles are sticking out the side, like the nacelles are sticking out the side here, like the Romulan bird, well, not the bird of prey. What is it? The Romulan warbird.
yeah, the thing that always makes me laugh when I see all these spaceship designs, I look at them and go, why are they so streamlined? It's like, because it just looks so great. I was like, no, dumbass, it's because you've been concentrating on aerodynamics on the ground. In space, you can build a damn cube. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, having said that, these things do seem to hit things an awful lot. And by being streamed, well, I thought about this, and I was actually thinking about what if you just built a starship that looked like a box, right? We literally take a box and put a couple of engines on the side of it and throw that up there in space, and it's flying around with our little space drive, just flying around in space. You're flying through space dust. That's just, that thing is still gonna be a problem in terms of collisions and impacts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So every time I've designed a hypothetical spacecraft, I've always had at least a tapered nose, and that nose is armored, so that most of the armor in the ship is in the nose, so that if you hit an asteroid or even small rocks or something, they would just bounce off the nose rather than hit the front of that thing and just drill a hole right through it, right through the entire length of the ship and come out the back.
Yeah. So,
Um,
Jim, do you have any thoughts on this?
Not really, no.
Okay.
I think that's why they have a deflector system on the Enterprise, not so they're not running into things.
Yeah,
That's
a
true.
navigation
That's,
deflector.
they always
That is
called it
so
the
true.
deflector dish, and as a kid growing up watching Star Trek, they always called it the deflector dish, and I never understood what the hell it was for until I
That's-
read
Yeah.
one of the books and was
Tom,
like,
do that again.
"Oh yeah."
Right there. That itty bitty dish.
So,
It
for
looks
those of you
like
that
a.
don't know what the deflector dish actually is, there's two what are called deflector systems
Looks like a
on the
suction
Enterprise.
cup.
One of them is the system that provides defense in combat, and it creates a basically an egg-like shaped shield around the ship, and that's what that's what the pew pews bounce off of when you shoot the ship. But this is called the navigational deflector, and what the navigational deflector does is it pushes out basically a gravity beam, what's called a gravimetric beam in the front of the graviton beam in the front of the ship, and it like you're flying along and you come if there's an asteroid out there in front of the ship, a large enough asteroid, the ship will actually change course and go around. But like space dust and little stuff it's just too plentiful out there to just avoid all the time, it actually like pushes out of the way, like the cattle catcher on the front of a train. Yeah. So that's what this is. This is the starship's cattle catcher. And Judd's giving us another good example of a. I
Well,
lost my little
this is
stand.
actually
I was gonna say,
the
that
Eagle
looks like the
Moss,
OG.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is the Eagle Moss collection.
Is that an Eagle?
That
I
won't
was
be
about to
Enterprise.
ask if that's an Eagle Moss version.
Yeah, this is.
Can you put
I
your
don't know
hand
where my
behind
Explains
it?
why
TNG
it's
I don't
accurate.
know where my TNG Enterprise is. I have a.
Judd, can you put it
I have
back
a
up and put
Bluetooth
your hand
speaker.
behind it so we can see it better? There we go. Thank you. That is much appreciated. Let me. Beautiful.
It's actually not a bad model. I've got all of the other ships for at least the Enterprises.
And as you can see over my shoulder back there, you know, it's the Enterprise is a far cry from the real spaceship. First spaceship that we put up into space. The the ones that are based on rockets.
Yeah.
That back there is my model of the Apollo 11. The only ship that the only vessel that has actually carried a human being to another body in space and back again. Nobody else, so far as I know, no one else has walked on the moon besides Americans, and they all did it on Apollos. Yes, and my room is now a wreck. Things are falling down because this guy can't. Yeah, see, I mean, I can't even put this thing on my desk. That's how awkward that design is, and why it should not be landing on planets.
Fair enough.
Okay, so moving on.
Judd looks like he had.
I have from
Put your hand behind it.
the
Oh
most
gosh,
recent
that is super
Star Trek
dusty.
movie.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
But this actually has a magnet on it.
What class is that?
It has a magnet on it so it doesn't wiggle.
Well, it wiggles a little bit, but not much.
Yeah. What class is that?
What class is that supposed to be?
I don't know. It's the J.J. Abrams verse, so
It's an
doesn't-
Abrams verse ship.
it's an Abrams verse ship. It doesn't exist in canon. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Okay. Interestingly enough, a little piece of trivia. This computer right here is a mock-up of an Altair 8800. The Altair got its name because the guy that was designing the Altair 8800, they didn't have a name for it yet. And his son said, "Well, how about we use this Altair from Star Trek?" And so this machine is literally named for a planet in Star Trek.
I mean, you see Star Trek pop up in interesting locations. I think there was a project in the mid 2000s where people were they were delidding integrated circuit chips and doing analysis of them. And this one guy doing it kept finding all these really interesting little things that had nothing to do with the circuit. They're like, there was a Star Trek nerd when there was a little NCC 1701 engraved in the silicon for the chip. Or a little Chewbacca or Han Solo, or I think one person actually, I think it was on the die of an Intel test chip. It was an engineering test sample chip. They delidded it to check something, and they looked at it, and down there in the bottom right corner, very, very tiny, was an NCC 1701 original Enterprise engraved. And I was like, if that ever went into production with that, and CBS found out, they're gonna
Yeah,
Intel's
really.
gonna lose their ass in court. But the thing is you find these as one-offs, and it's just like nerds pop up. Nerd culture pops up in the most interesting places.
Well, the Mike Mayfield Star Trek game is arguably one of the most popular computer games ever made, and it was, you know,
Isn't it like
Paramount never
it and Dim are like the most?
CBS never gave him a license to make it. He didn't ask for one, and so far as I know, they've never tried to stop anybody from remaking or distributing that game.
Yeah, I think it might be because they're not making any money, and they're like, it's promoting Star Trek,
Yeah.
it's getting fans back into
And
it.
that game is on literally every computing platform in existence. From
As I say, isn't it in Doom the one's always going jockeying for number one on most ported game ever?
something like that. Yeah, because I mean, it runs on anything that runs BASIC mostly without changes, other than changing the machine specific commands. Okay, so back to Firefly. Star Trek Discovery Episode 2. At this point, I thought it changed from being changed from being a Star Wars remake to being a Firefly remake when they entered the bar, and the cowboy comes in and basically he's like, "I run this planet. You guys answer to me. You can give me your dilithium."
I did like the touch where basically they went to, it's a shady little bar town and everyone's gonna be on a standoff, and they're like, "Prove you are who you say you are." And Tilly's just like, "Let me quote this shit right here, right now. This is out of the fucking book." They don't know
I tell
that.
you,
They don't know what the book
yeah.
is. It's been gone for
I-
900 or almost 900 years. 800, because he said since before he was born, 100, 150 years before he was born, or something like that. But, this guy here, we don't get to see him long, but we like him. He's a very likable character right off the bat, and it's because he's what Star Trek always looked for. He was a true believer. He always believed that, the Federation was going to come and help them. The Federation was going to free them from the tyranny that is basically, what would we call it, a modern day equivalent?
Robber Baron is actually the term you're thinking of.
Robin Baron.
Or land baron. They used to do exactly what this guy does. They would take over in large swaths of land, and they would control a town. And you couldn't deal with anybody in that town without dealing with him.
Yeah, hence the old song, "I sold my soul to the company store."
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll tell you, this guy's death ticked me off, and not because it was horrific, because it was, but because it was so unnecessary to the plot to kill him. And it was just like, again, he was killed just to show that this guy was a jerk.
Yeah.
And then they let him go. And just for a minute, I understand Saru's point. We're better than that. We don't kill for revenge. But letting that guy go, that guy was an avowed enemy of the Discovery. Letting him go left the room with an enemy at their back.
So
That's what I think was a stupid
real quick
tactical
though, Saru gave the choice to the barkeeper.
And neither Saru nor the barkeeper should have let that man walk out.
But the thing is, for Saru, he's got first contact and an initiative inside his head that was, this is how things are. Just because we are so far away from home, just because we're not in our time, I'm not going to break the Federation rules. And he's sticking with that. This is their planet. This is their situation. And the barkeeper gets that choice. He gets that choice, and he decides that he's going to let the guy live. But the thing is, he sends him to an uncertain death.
Hey, Jim, what happened when Captain Kirk exiled Khan?
He became a huge problem.
I hadn't really forgot where he was.
It came back to bite him in the butt.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that guy's going to come back to bite him in the butt. And
of course,
that's one of the rules of writing. Can anybody tell me what rule of writing that is?
as Chekhov's gun.
Chekhov's phaser. Thank you very much.
Wow, you're really gonna mess with the Russians on
Now,
literature.
you might want to explain to them what Chekhov's gun is.
We are you kidding? Russians invented literature. Okay, so we all know the idea of foreshadowing in fiction. When you are going to set up, and we were taught this in every creative writing class I ever took, that if you're going to set up the solution to a problem, you had better introduce that solution early enough in the story that it makes sense by the time you get to the end of the story where the solution is. Chekhov and the writer Chekhov, he actually he spelled that out, and he basically said, if at the beginning of your story you have a rifle hanging over the fireplace, that gun had better go off by the end.
Better go off
and
by
w-
the third act.
by the third act, yeah. And I've seen it quoted different ways, but the whole point being that you first, you don't put unnecessary elements into a story. A lot of writers will digress like crazy. And I mentioned earlier this week that Back to the Future is a great example of a story that is perfectly written, in that there's no spare line of dialogue in that movie. And that's so this guy being let go can only mean one thing. If you believe in Chekhov's phaser, then that guy has to come back by the end of the season, and he has to be a threat. And I still say it was a tactical mistake to release him. At the very least, they should have kept him. They should have kept him locked up, and I think they should have executed him, because they really didn't have the resources to hold him safely.
And you'll notice that Giorgio said so in the episode.
She did, yeah.
Yeah, they basically hung a lantern on it. It's going. We don't know how, but that dude is coming back, and he is either going to be a solution or a massive problem.
Speaking of Giorgio,
What?
what did you guys think of her portrayal of this character, and how much fun she is?
She's awesome.
I just love the fact that most people look at her and go, "Why is she so familiar?" And I just slap my head and go, "You've got to be kidding me! That's a very famous actress, just not in the U.S."
I was
She's
slightly
perfectly cast.
pained, but that's because the character itself is just, she is made to be irritating.
I don't find her irritating at all. I find her a breath of fresh air.
Of course you would, Jim.
She
Not
is
necessarily
also,
She's in amongst all these stuffy Starfleet types, and she just walks in and slaps down some realism.
You just made everything.
It's weird. I hit my mouse and my camera freaks out.
Yep.
Oh, that's right.
Seizure warning! Seizure warning! He broke his
Oh
webcam.
no, Jim's been hacked. Jim's been hacked.
It's the future coming.
No, that's the.
Oh gosh, it went
Oh my
green.
gosh, Jim! You have been space probed. The whales are coming to get you.
I have a feeling it was just the USB port jiggling around, and the
Probably.
encoder's just freaking out.
About half a frame got dropped, and the camera's trying to decipher the data.
Captain, we can't take any more.
We lost Jim.
Well, I mean, that comes to the end of. I mean, that kind of comes to the end of. How did I not? I missed some pieces. I had 3 or 4 more pictures that didn't make it in here, and I'm really bummed.
Moving on.
So they that's what happened, is we didn't get to the end of we didn't really get to the end of Burnham's story in the first episode. So the final thing that happens in the first episode, of course, is that that we find out that Book is actually he is part of the intergalactic PETA, and he is saving.
No.
these
Take that back. He is not part of PETA. He is a space creature rescue organization. He actually does something good.
Okay.
Not PETA. Not PETA. Again, not PETA.
Carl Perkins.
I am not opening that can.
So
And I only wanna
intergalactic
get into-
ASPCA.
Nope.
I don't even want to
Nope.
get into his empathic connection to animals and stuff because we don't know yet what that's all about or how that really works. But
He
anybody? Okay, I just got this question for you. Did anybody have a dry eye at the end when Burnham is swearing in the guy at the starbase and letting him hang the flag?
It was totally awesome. It was totally awesome. I
That
will
scene
admit I got a
fitting.
little choked up.
It
was
wasn't
that,
so
Brad?
much of a tearjerker for me. It fits so damn well.
I just wish she had actually given him an oath of office right there. I really wanted to see her say, "Raise your right hand and repeat after me," because they
with
should have had that.
with how emotional both people were, I kind of get why that didn't happen. It was on
feels a
the
little off.
forefront.
Yeah.
I know it feels a little off, but at the same time, they both have hope reignited,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
and
And
it's a
I know
lot
looking at
of
the trailer,
emotion.
for upcoming episodes, that's really going to be the theme of this season is reigniting hope and rebuilding the Federation into a beacon of hope like it's supposed to be.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Starport Omega. If you like this episode, stay tuned for more.